Welcome to Unlocked. I'm Dr. Joel Swakowski. In this show, we explore how truth comes to life through real stories and real people. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Freese, once again, part 5 of his story. This episode, though, I get to be a part of his story. We're going to do a special episode where we're going to kind of dig into a different arc that was going on during a lot of the stuff he's already shared. I won't get into it now in this intro too much because I'll get into it in a second while you see me talking with Jonathan. So let's dig in. All right. Hey, Jonathan, welcome back for your 5th episode. How you doing, man?
I'm great. Number 5.
Number 5. Oh, man, I'm glad to have you back. So what we're going to do here is a little different because this episode, I would say I'm as involved in the story as you are. We've done a really good job, or you've done a really good job of taking us on this journey of your life story. And it ended in this time period, just a few years ago now, when you started helping this community of people over in Scotland. That's where part 4 ended. But with this one, what I want to do is take like a zoom out here and kind of tell a story of another big piece of events going on behind the scenes, not always behind the scenes, but that were happening simultaneously as everything else going on in your story. And so where I'll start is this. Okay, what year was it when you joined the community that we now refer to as the home church that became Music of Life Church?
Yeah, that was 2009.
All right, in 2009, let me just say, what was it like joining that community when you joined it?
It was intense.
Intense.
So I would say it was intense in this group, in the home church,
Yeah.
and I would say that it was intense outside of the group as well. So we referred to that as the group because it's like we were a home church. It was a group of friends. It was just like we kind of lived uh like every part of our lives together. The house that John and Laura were living at was just full of people. It was all the very early church years,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was intense. So it was a lot of um because of how much persecution John was
Yeah.
uh experiencing. I kind of came in towards the middle, if not like a kind of right at when it just started to calm down a little bit
Yeah.
of like the heat of it. And so a lot of the conversations that were happening was me getting caught up and brought up to speed about what was going on, because yeah, I came in to go, this is really great. Why are there only 12 people here?
Right. And so, yeah, where you're at, I mean, hey, and viewer, go ahead and watch the Mob series with John, and you'll also hear some of the background of what Jonathan and I are talking about. But basically, from, Modeling God was published in 2007. It wasn't long until like in 2008 when a lot of really severe persecution was coming against John, and then collaterally to the community that he was a part of. 2009, all that persecution ratchets up even more because of a certain organization getting involved. So you remember what that organization was that was like head first against us?
That would be the Fox Cities Evangelical Ministerial Fellowship, the FCEMF.
Yes, sir. All right. So yeah, that's what I think it's fascinating. You come in, it says a lot about you and your desire for truth. And at that point, we have this epic story you shared of where you called up John and like, who the F are you? Like, this is all like, cause you're hearing about this guy.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of talk and a lot of bad talk, but you cut right through it and you become pretty quickly one of the pillars of our small community. And So what would you have said if in 2009 I said to you, Jonathan, in 10 years, we're going to be a part of the FCEMF?
I think I would have just been, I don't know what I would have said. I don't know if I think I would have been speechless. I think I would have just like, that makes no
No
sense.
sense.
That makes no sense at all. That is, yeah, you've lost the plot.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you lost the plot. It makes no sense. I probably would have said something to the effect of, only by God's grace would that ever happen, because I would never make that happen. If anything, you and I, for years, dealing with the persecution, even after 2009, but for years when Music Life Church started and when things were going well, we're discipling, making leaders, you and I used to say, and maybe still do sometimes, like, man, we don't even need you to agree with us. Just leave us alone. If you just let us do our thing, we won't bother you if you don't bother us. But that just never seemed to happen. Because one of the things you and I we were taught, it's modeled out by God and by our mentors, respond, right? How you respond is more important than what's happening in the first place. So it's like we're basically like, our involvement with this organization and with the people who came and persecuted us was always in response. We never initiated anything onto anybody. We never initiated a confrontation onto anybody. It was always done in response. So, with all that said, we got your great story and then John's great stories that everybody can watch. You know, the mob series and your story up to now to get us all caught up to speed. So what happens here, I'm going to interject here and chat for a little bit, because you and I, you know, we're 2013 Music Life Church started. We're associate pastors together. We're still dealing on a monthly basis with persecution coming against us. You know, we start working with other churches sporadically, and it's going well, like with WCF, that's going well. And then I become senior pastor of Music Life Church in the end of 2016. And as I'm growing and kind of getting my feet settled as a pastor, I start interacting with other pastors in the valley. Because we're trying to develop leaders, we're trying to make an impact. And I remember, again, all in response, I start interacting with, like, I go to church with my mom. My mom at the time wasn't a member of Music Life Church. I go to church with her at a church in a nearby city. And I start a relationship with the senior pastor there. And we start meeting. Just so happen to, while we're meeting at one of our coffee meetings, another pastor from a nearby church, senior pastor, runs into me. We were in the discipleship program together at Christ the Rock in Menasha, which just so happened to be one of the churches that was at the forefront of the persecution against us. But anyways, him and I started interacting. We started meeting on like maybe once or twice a month. And that's when he invited me to an FCEMF meeting. And I remember after that meeting reaching out to you and John and being like, you guys will never guess what happened. Like, he was one of the officers at the time. And this is like 2019, right? So you remember that when I was invited to an FCMF meeting?
Yeah, it just seems like, looking back at that time and back in 2009, that was just the enemy. I think we saw them as the enemy.
Right.
So to be a part of that group is like, what, have we lost our salvation? Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
we've
Like,
joined the dark side.
yeah, like, so it's just over for us. Like, we've quit.
Yeah.
We've quit this pursuit that we're on, and we're
Yeah.
just going to be comfortable, like, salaried pastors in a comfortable job. But it was
Yeah.
just, so it was just, it was kind of like you were invited, and it's like, okay. A- and what are you going to do about that, Joel?
Right. And that's where it's the response thing, right? I felt like, and this is a key part of the story, is every step where we become more involved was always in response. We never tried to make anything happen. So I was invited to a meeting. And this is also after the pastor who invited me, who was the vice president of the organization at the time, shared with me, like I had already shared with him some of the issues. So he was, I would say like vaguely aware of what had happened to our community and what had been happening to our church, and he still invited me in.
And so at that point, it's just you have to go.
I know
What
it really.
and it's those simultaneous feelings of like, this is the enemy. You're going in, you're going into a suicide mission, and you
Yeah,
have to.
yeah, and there's part of that is also part of that just it feels like a fivefold thing too, right? Like, I mean, you and I being in the fivefold ministry, John and I just did an episode on the Modeling God's Wills podcast about the church leadership roles. And one of the things you and I have talked about on the What the Flock podcast about these gifts that Jesus gives to the church in Ephesians 4, the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher. One of the ways those are separate from other gifts is these are leadership roles that when people have them, there's just this certain draw people have to like when there's something out in front of you that is this leadership calling, this push from God, you just can't help but go into it. Even though you know it's going to suck, you do it anyways because it's the right thing to do and because you feel like you've been called to it. Now, I get great counsel from you and John. I reached out to our friend Dan Gibson, who at the time was still a senior pastor, and he came to the first meeting that I was invited to. Man, I remember our goal was just go in and be an awesome visitor of this meeting. Somebody hosts, somebody provides a meal, somebody does a little teaching, there's a little discussion and prayer time. It's great. I remember going in there. I don't have an agenda other than I'm just going to be pleasant and nice to everybody and real friendly. And I remember that first meeting, the question that everybody was asked was, what is the vision or the mission or vision of your church? And I'm just like, all right. So I was able to share about Music Life Church, and it was great. So it wasn't long. Like I started, you attend one of these meetings, and then you get put on the email list, and then you're invited. And it wasn't long before they need churches and pastors to host. They hand out this sign up sheet, and me and Dan sign up again in response to them handing this sheet out. We're like, should we do one? And let's do it together. And I think that's when we started inviting our like his leaders and me, the leaders that I was working with. So that's where you kind of really quickly get back and involved. Although I was the one invited, and eventually, it wasn't long before the officers took a shine to me, and I think I did a really good job of just being supportive of the mission of the FCEMF. They asked me to be an officer, but you were involved in it right from the start. Like there was only just a few, like maybe 2 or 3 months where me and Dan were going before like you and Jake and uh, a bunch of other leaders from Malk and WCF started coming. So you remember what it was like when you started coming to these meetings yourself?
Yeah, I mean, pretty casual, pretty like a very standard prayer, prayer as a group and a meal and a Bible study and a hangout, and it was just, yeah, it was just kind of like what are we doing here? What's the purpose of this meeting? It's just kind of like a break and for people to get to know each other and a networking thing. So it was just like, "Oh, this is just really normal,"
It
I
was
would
pretty
say.
easy, right?
Mhm.
It felt very similar, like our Wednesday night services. It felt very similar to that, right? Where there's a little teaching and then there's like a discussion, and there's time for questions, and that. So I think we had a grid for these type of meetings,
Mhm.
and I remember being excited to be interacting with a bunch of other pastors and leaders in the valley, and hoping that it would, you know, we weren't about to try to hold anything against the FCMF for what it had done to us 10 years prior. But, that's not where the story ends. So then, COVID happens, all that stuff. The FCMF continues. Some of the meetings become virtual and all that through 2020. But it was, towards the end of halfway through 2020 into the end of the year, we're starting to meet in person again. And that's when I was asked to be an officer. Now, at the same time that I'm asked to be an officer, you that year started meeting with a pastor who used to be on staff at Christ the Rock, right?
Right.
A pastor you had a relationship with, right? I think you're like a family friend, you could say even.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So that definitely plays a part into this whole story. What do you remember what those meetings were about?
It was what was awesome is, my mom kind of initiated with me that I should reach out to him and see what's up with him and what's going on, and um and so I did, and I've connected with him, and he seemed really open to meeting, and uh we had some incredible prayer times together and just sharing our lives together. And um after spending some time with him, one of the things that he said to me is, he goes, I'm not used to being discipled
This is the
by
guy in his
somebody.
60s.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he
Yeah.
was close to, either in his 60s or close to it. But yeah, he was, so that's what he was saying to me, and I was just kind of blown away by that. Um and so I was just sharing with him things that I was learning, and things that were on my heart for, the valley, and for, the church in the Fox cities. And so we would have a lot of conversations about that and my thoughts. And he was really, really interested and receptive to a lot of my, um what I was learning.
Yeah.
So, and it was helping him, because he had had a pretty traumatic experience in the church. And um I was really checking up on him, because, the pastor that of the church that was let go, he or the pastor of the church that fired him, that pastor killed himself. And I think that was the cause for why my mom's like, maybe you should reach out to him and see how
Yeah.
he's doing.
Yeah.
So that's really how we reconnected, and it had been a
Well,
while. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of it was just, catching up and just caring for each other, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But inevitably, because I mean, you're both pastors, you care for people, and there is a lot of wounded people in the valley, in the Fox Cities area. Eventually, the conversation goes to, how do we fix the issues in the valley?
Yeah.
This was a big catalyst for what happened in the FCMF and then the following years. Do you remember what that maybe not final meeting you had, but there was a meeting where this topic came up?
Yeah, I came to him and I was just like, I'm getting involved with the FCMF, and um I just feel like the the God is trying to flow through the valley, and he's trying to do a work here. And then this pastor said, "Yeah, it's like a log jam."
Yeah.
It's like these logs are being jammed in this dam, and instead of the waters flowing freely, it's been dammed up. And that's when I told him, one of the biggest things that I see that is stopping the flow of God is what happened with John Lenhart
Yeah.
in the valley. And um, after explaining to him what went on, like he looked into it and he was privy to all of that. He was actually somebody who told John, that he was wrong how he interacted with him in the past.
Yeah, I think one of the two people who confessed and repented to John from the
Yeah.
persecution.
Yeah. So he was really just an absolutely incredible, humble man of God. And he, uh, he ended up confessing, and, John was awesome. He's just like, this is enough, like to be heard and to share is enough. And so when I came to him to talk to him about what I believe is a log jam, he absolutely agreed when he did his digging. So he did some digging, and he's like, "Yeah, this is amazing." And he was like, "What do you think we should do about this?" You know. So I said, I don't know if this is something that should be brought to the officers or what. And yeah, so I believe he did.
Yeah, he initiated that. So just based on conversations with you, he took the initiative. He had been a member of the FCEMF and also a man of reputation. So, he had influence. And he had a conversation with one of the other officers in the FCEMF. And in that last meeting in 2000, so December of 2000, the officers met after that month's meeting and had a separate meeting. And the pastor you had been meeting with was there, as well as the current FCMF officers, and then the officers who were voted in, because the officers would adjust at some level every year. So there were, I don't know, something like 8 of us in that room, 4 officers every year, but there were, some replacements, some people going out, some people coming in, and I happened to be there. And again, I'm not doing any, like, this is the moment where I'm like, I get it now. I know why God called us to the FCEMF. It had been a year and a half of never missing a meeting, hosting meetings, being quick to participate, quick to pray, bringing energy, positivity. You and me and the WCF leaders and the other Mulk leaders who start coming, we're all young, usually the youngest there too. So there's this energy coming and this like revitalization of this organization. And I'm sitting in that meeting and I'm like, I get it now. Like now it's all making sense. I'm glad we did this. Again, I'm not leading anything, but I'm sitting here and I'm listening to a bunch of leaders in the Fox cities, some who were instrumental in the persecution against John, talking about how we need to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
And the current president, who happened to be a year and a half earlier, the guy who invited me in when he was the vice president, his last act as president was to say, if we trespassed against John, we need to repent. And that kind of kicked off 2021, is like a year where I'm now an officer, just so happened to be the vice president, which within that role includes a guaranteed president position the year later. So I know I have at least 2 years ahead of me of being an officer, one in which I'll be the president. But my whole year as a vice president, that year essentially is summed up by the FCMF officers deciding how are we going to handle what we did to John Lenhart. And now I'm in a position where I'm saying, how are we going to handle what we did against John Lenhart? Because I'm
Yeah.
operating in this role. It's
Yeah.
nuts. So that
Because
year,
now you as a member of this organization hurt
right,
this man, and
within
it's
this
still
role,
happening. You
it's
still
still
hear
happening.
about it.
Yep. It's still happening, and still on a monthly
Yeah.
basis, we're on a month, look, on at least a monthly basis, stuff is happening. I say at least because we're hearing stuff on a monthly basis. That probably means it's more often than that stuff is still going on. And the FCEMF was really the guilty organization in the sense of giving churches and pastors a justification to not have to do their own research. So what's the first move? And it was pretty incredible because within a week, I think, the officers, including the pastor you were meeting with, decide to have a meeting with John. So that really started the repair. And what it was giving John the opportunity to be heard by the FCMF. So again, John felt really great about how that meeting went. We met with them. The officers heard him in a way he had never been heard before by the FCMF. But that doesn't end. It doesn't end there, because now what the officers got to decide over 2021 is what is the FCMF made a declaration about John Lenhart in 2009. What are
Yeah.
we going to do now? How are we going to repair that? We've repaired with John, but how are we going to repair with the Valley? And that was the year. I mean, I could go into, I don't need to get into the details on this, but it was essentially, so what happens, the FCMF meets every month. We're not talking about this stuff during those regular meetings. The officers usually would meet a couple times a year outside of those monthly meetings. The year I was an officer, the first year I was an officer, we met every month outside of the monthly meetings. There was that much conversation going on of what are we going to do? And long story short, that whole year essentially turns into, by the end of the year, the decision is we're not going to do anything. We will deal with people who have concerns about John Lenhart on a case by case basis, but we're not going to make a declaration about what our views are on John and his book Modeling God to the Valley the way we did in 2009. So where I stood was like, okay, like I didn't agree with that stance, but we at least made a stand. As much as it is a declaration to state your will that you're just going to be lukewarm, I guess at least it was a decision was made. Then I become the president 2022. The president who was running it the year before me gets voted back in to be the treasurer, which I mean, I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. He was concerned about the direction I was going to go. In fact, at the end of the year 2021, he told me if he knew how close I was with John Lenhart, he never would have asked me to be an officer in the first place, which is unfortunate because he's basically saying your relationship with this one guy to me eradicates all the value you brought to this organization over the last year and a half, 2.5 years by that point. All the value I brought, all the people that started coming because of me. He's saying none of that matters. I wouldn't have had you be an officer if I knew. But by that time, it was too late. So I went a whole year as an officer, not bringing this up at all. I never brought up John. I never brought up Modeling God for the whole first year I was president. And this is where it gets real interesting. By the end of 2022, we as officers, are needing to decide who's going to be the following year's officers. I'm the president. I should be done, right? My term is over. But two of the officers nominate me to be the vice president again. Okay. Again, I'm not initiating any of this. And then those same
So then
two
why was everybody wearing vote for Joel Swikowski buttons?
yeah,
Why were you handing out everybody vote for
yeah.
Joel?
I mean, in response.
No, no, there was no campaigning.
No, in fact, and the times you and I were even
No.
voted, the times you and I were even voted in as officers, you and I we wouldn't even vote. We'd abstain, right? We'd abstain from the vote. Not that putting your own name in is wrong. We just always felt like I want to be free and clear of saying I made any of this happen.
Yeah. No facilitating our purpose and progress,
No,
right?
right. So that officer meeting at the end of 2021 or at the end of 2022, when I'm nominated back in as vice president, and you are nominated as treasurer, which triggered the guy who was treasurer, who was the president the year before. Because essentially he took that at because the two officers who nominated you also had concerns about this treasurer and how he was participating and leading within the organization. Now, the narrative got turned into essentially us kicking him out and manipulating the system. But the reality is the only thing that happened is they expressed concerns and they brought another nomination to the table. So the next month, December 2022, you and me are both voted in. You become the new treasurer. I become vice president. There's a couple of the two guys who nominated the both of us are also officers.
And Joel, if I could jump in here,
Please.
one of the main qualifications for being voted in was obviously being somebody who is a follower of Christ, but second was involvement.
Yeah.
So that was the big reason why I think I was nominated, is because we just didn't, like you said before, you and I just didn't miss any meetings.
I don't think for the years we went there, we never missed it.
And I was living in Milwaukee, remember,
Right.
too. So
Commuting.
I'm driving up, to these FCEMF meetings. It's because it's really important for me to be there. Like, I want to be there. I wanna have a say in how our valley gets healed.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be involved, and I wanted to do that. So that was always like, uh-oh, am I going to get voted in because I've been so active and I haven't missed a meeting? And it's kind of, it seemed inevitable because there was kind of like, I'm the only other person that's been there since, kind of you were
It had
around.
been about 2.5 years now, and
Yeah.
and that's where honestly, even when I was voted in as an officer at the end of 2020, like when I got the call being nominated, I wasn't like it was great. I didn't expect it necessarily, but I wasn't surprised by it either. I'm like, I know I'd been kicking ass at these meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Just showing up. One, hosting is such a big deal, and we would host.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were great members.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I get that too. It just, yeah, it did seem inevitable, but ruffled a lot of feathers. So the woman who becomes the president, one of the officers, under what I will be the new vice president, calls an officer meeting. And that's the first meeting you were at as an officer. And our year of being officers together hadn't technically started yet. But it's like, let's have, so what I established like the year earlier is, let's have an officer meeting before the year starts so we can, I want, as the president, I want to inform all the officers what the plan is for this next year. I feel like God gave me a vision for what we're going to do. I wanted to share it with all you first so that at our first meeting in January, you're not all blindsided by whatever it is. You can come alongside me. We can collaborate together. So she did what we thought, the same thing, right? But we all sit down, and the first question she zeroes right in on me, and she says, "What's your agenda?"
What is your agenda? Yep.
And I fell for it. What I should have done is took a backward step and just said, "What do you think my agenda is? Clearly, you think I have one, so I'd love to hear what you think it is." But instead, I answered her question, and I went right at this argument with her. And essentially, what it came down to is her accusing me of taking over the FCEMF, which was interesting because, basically the reason I become an officer a couple years earlier is because of the involvement I had and because of the people I was inviting. Nobody in the years I had been there had brought more people to the FCMF than I had. Now that same stat is being used against me. You brought all these people in to take over, essentially manipulating the votes, right? And and I remember asking her, so should I have not invited these people in? Well, no, I'm not saying that. It's like, you can't have it both ways then. You can't use this against me, but then also say, yeah, we want people to invite others to these meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, this meeting gets out of hand. Eventually the argument between her and I ends. The other officers are given a say. And essentially what happens is she says, we want to shut down the FCEMF. And that becomes the topic of conversation with all the officers in the room. And that's where I'll let you take over. So what happened to you and in and around this meeting at this officer meeting?
At my first FCEMF officers meeting,
Yeah.
I so everybody shared
Yep.
except for one pastor. And the pastor that was there, he kept interrupting one of the pastors, I believe the secretary at that time.
It was our friend Derek from
Okay.
Winnicott Christian Fellowship. Yeah,
Okay. We can say Derek.
yeah, we'll say his name. That's great. Yeah.
So Derek in this meeting was just getting interrupted by the past treasurer.
Yeah.
And he goes, I feel bullied
Yeah.
right now because I keep being interrupted.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember what he was the ex-treasurer was interrupting him about, but essentially he just kept trying to share, kept trying to talk, and he was getting interrupted. So Derek said, I feel like I'm getting bullied right now.
Yeah.
And so what this pastor did is this pastor took his chair and scooched it right up so that he was really close
Yep.
to Derek's face. And he goes, no, I won't interrupt you. I
And
won't
then
interrupt
just
you.
kind of was like peacocking him the whole. It was
Yeah.
almost like your little sister touching you. You're like, stop touching me, and then all of a sudden she just goes like this, and she's like, not touching you, not touching you. Like that was
Yeah.
the equivalent to that, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to interrupt you, but I'm just going to.
Yeah. And so he was nodding. Like I could tell that he was getting heated and he was getting close to Derek. And then so Derek kept talking and he kept getting closer to Derek, and I could just see, Derek's Derek's doing a really good job. He's focusing and he's trying to share while this pastor's kind of getting in his face. And I said to this pastor, are you being a bully right now?
Yeah.
And he snapped at me
Yeah.
and he goes, you're saying, am I being a bully right now? So you're making an accusation about me. You're saying, are you being a bully? So you're saying, so am I, Jonathan? You say it. You answer it. Am I a bully or am I not? You answer it. And I said, well, Pastor, I believe that you're so far behind in answering questions that it would be unjust for me to answer your question.
Yeah. Brilliant answer.
And he said, fine. And he gets up and he walks towards me and he said, would I be a bully if I did this? And he took his fist and he stopped just right before my face.
While having his other hand on you.
Oh yeah, he put his hand on, he goes, would I be a bully if I did this? He put his left hand on my shoulder and put his,
Yeah.
his hand right here. And I don't remember which one I said first, so you can help me, Joel. I believe I said to him, no, I think I said to the president first.
This
Is
was
that
the
right?
yeah.
So
So
I said to,
instead of looking at him,
so he put his fist
yep.
in my face and I turned to the current president and I said, are you scared for me right now?
Yep.
Scared or are you worried about me?
You said, do you feel safe?
Oh, is that what I said?
Yeah, because she said yes. And then I said, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But that was so like you were so awesome because the whole like you're so far behind in answering questions, it would be unjust for me to answer yours was just so from God. I feel like that put you in a spot of like I'm just gonna sit and rest in the Lord.
I kept thinking about like, Jesus dealing with the Pharisees, where he was like, Jesus was asked, is your baptism of God or of man? Or, are you the son of God? And then he said, is the baptism of John? I'll answer your question if you answer.
Yeah.
It was authority, right? Where do you get your authority
Yeah,
from?
your
That was the
authority.
question. Where do you get your authority from? And he goes, well, I'll answer your question if you answer my question.
Yeah.
The baptism of John, was that of God or man? And they didn't answer, so he didn't answer. And I was like, okay, I know I pretty much stick to communication guidelines. I try to,
Yeah.
but there are times where, there's a answering somebody's question is not for their benefit.
Right.
And that was essentially what I was saying to this pastor. It's not for your benefit for me to answer this question, for me to continue, because I would just be enabling at this point.
Right.
So that's kind of where that was coming from. But so I asked her, do you feel safe right now?
Yeah, because the reason I
That's
remember it is
awesome.
because I answered it. I don't.
I don't.
But you're like even this, it felt like it was something Jesus would do too, where it's like this guy comes after you and starts attacking you, puts his hands on you and threatening you physically. And you turn to the president and you ask her a question.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is where this guy, the treasurer, the former treasurer, is so far gone. He's not going to hear anything, anyways. The best way to reach him is to do it unconsciously. And the best way to reach her is unconsciously as well through a question. That's why I was just so like what that happened was just so great. Do you
Yeah,
remember?
and then I turned to him, and then that's when I turned back to him, and I just said, "I forgive you."
Yeah. Oh.
And he said, "Thank you," and then he sat down.
And then it was that pretty much ended the meeting.
Yeah, so it was just we packed up packed up tables and chairs and put everything away. We ended up, reaching out to Derek. I remember that. That was
Yeah.
awesome because I was worried about Derek. We made sure that everything was calm and, The meeting was over. The president ended the meeting, and then when everything was over, we reached out to Derek, and you, Derek, and I,
We had
we
coffee.
yeah, we had coffee, and it was just one of those, wow, what just happened? Let's unpack that. I can't believe, that happened.
And the other officer was our friend Dan,
Mm-hmm.
and we had gotten on the phone with him too. So we connected with him, but I honestly, I feel like that meeting ended up becoming this bonding moment between the four of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because it was the four of us that went into being officers together the next year, starting just a few weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
Because what ended up happening is the woman who was going to be president tried saying, let's get rid of the FCMF. So I sent the message and I said, if you want to do this, we got to follow the Constitution, which within the Constitution there is a paragraph on how to make an amendment within the Constitution.
Right.
Dissolving the Constitution is definitely, it is the amendment, if you will, right? She didn't want to go through all that. Like, and she was even given counsel, like, why don't you just stop going to meetings? Like, this is how easy the FCMF ending could be. Just don't meet anymore. And it's like, you guys have this Constitution we've been following, and now you just don't want to use it anymore. So instead of going through the work she would have had to do to dissolve the FCEMF, she resigned. Which, this was unprecedented, but essentially, because of the way the vice president role leads into the president role, I became president again, back to back years. And it was an incredible year of the FCEMF. The attendance started lowering, but the meetings were superb. And all of this, so there's two big things I want to hit on before we end this episode. One is, and I think this idea was something that was initiated by you, is should the FCEMF invite John in and have a public forum? Like, let's do the work that we believe the FCMF should have done 2 years earlier.
Yeah.
When I was first an officer and when we tried to decide how are we going to repair this with the Valley? Well, it's like, well, what would be the opposite of what the FCMF did in 2009?
Right.
It's you fly John in and you give him a public platform and you invite everybody to come and ask him whatever questions you want. So that was definitely from God. What was it like having this public forum?
Yeah, the public forum was, I mean, it was intense because you had no idea who was going to show up.
Right.
But that's where it was. It was something that I brought forward because I was still, again, the damage is still there. Like, that's great. I'm glad that the officers of the FCEMF heard John and they did that part. But now I'm an officer.
Yeah.
In the FCEMF, and I'm sitting here feeling that word of this log jam still occurring in the Valley. And so that's where we need to go back, and what ought the FCEMF had done is say nothing about John's book. You didn't have to say anything about it. Why did the FCEMF need to say anything about it to begin with?
Yeah.
But because the FCEMF did all of these steps, I'm sorry, we're going to have to undo all of that damage that you did.
Yeah.
Because we need to go step by step by step by step. All the way back to what's the first thing that ought to have happened is there should have, if there was concerns about the Valley, we should have had a public forum.
Yeah.
If there was multiple churches having multiple things and, whatever, there's a spiritual shift, there's a, a thing that we're concerned about. Let's make it all public. Why are we doing anything secretly?
Right.
So let's make it public. Let's film the whole thing. Let's invite everybody who possibly can show up. Let's give John the opportunity to say what if he would have been given a platform. John, what would you have wanted to say? Can you please give us a value by showing up? So John showed up. It was amazing. And then, we asked him if he would be willing to answer questions
Yeah.
from the public.
Yeah.
And it was short. Like John's talking and the questions and all of that, and going through I believe you asked him the questions.
Yeah, so the first thing we did, we gave him the floor, right?
Yeah.
I gave a little intro. We gave him the floor to share, and then what we did is we took the letter that was written against John had 5 or 6 bullet points on it back in 2009. So what I did, the first part of the Q&A was me moderating by sharing, this is what the FCMF said in 2009. Is this accurate? And John would respond and then elaborate. So he was first given the opportunity to respond directly to the accusations made against him. Then we opened the floor up, and there were only 2 people who stood up and
Yep.
had any questions or comments towards him.
Yep.
And John handled it great. But I like the point you made, though, is John came for the FCMF and for the Fox Cities, the churches in the Fox Cities benefit. John didn't need to do this. By this point, John's so far past what the FCMF has been doing. He's living his own life. He's living in Florida. He's living the dream. To come back was more work for him than what he needed or cared to do.
Yep.
But he also knew he didn't want to hold up this log jam by doing his part.
Mhm.
And he wanted to, to show, like, although he'd forgiven, John is the one who taught me, and this is from the Bible. We can see this is the ultimate form of forgiveness is when you're willing to help the person who trespassed against you.
Right.
So John showed that for all of us, for our benefit as well. So that was an incredible, incredible day. And it is.
That was exhausting because you just, I remember you being incredibly intentional and very specific, wearing your FCEMF hat, and
We
like
literally had FCMF officer badges and everything.
that was important because you're representing the FCEMF, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to facilitate God moving in the valley. Like we're trying to clear this tradition, this logjam, this abuse, this damage. Because if God were going to be flowing in this valley, and it's just it would affirm what's going on in the valley. Like God moves and it affirms what's going on. And
Yeah.
and if there's all of this damage, God, I think, would be just enabling the valley. So
Right.
it's like, no, let's make this right. We've trespassed. We need to make this right. And so yeah, it was it was exhausting. It was very emotional to have him, get through all of that. And I remember you just don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know if somebody's gonna like pull out a gun, and it's one of
Oh,
those. It's just you just yeah. So
yeah,
it was intense.
it was. And it didn't immediately unify the valley either. There were a lot of people at the forum, but there were most of the people who had been outright against John didn't show up.
Hmm.
Again, showing, like, did these people really want to learn?
Hmm.
But that was incredible. Great way for you and I to kind of like finish strong. Although that happened in May, was like we knew this was going to be it. We knew, like, for you and me, there's nothing after this for us to do anymore. We need to get out of the way.
Absolutely.
And I was able to do that just because I'm not gonna I literally told these guys, I'm like, do not nominate me again. I won't accept the nomination. Like, don't do it.
Uh,
You didn't have to say that because what was your move?
oh, honestly, I dissolved the role of the treasurer. So
You're the treasurer, and you're the one who brings the question of like, why do we have a treasurer?
it's just pointless. We were giving $2 out of tradition, and then I would go to the bank and I would drop off, $7.75
Yeah.
to the bank and just be like, oh, it was such a waste of time. And then the time that we didn't, we just there was a moment where we actually collected money for one of our servers, and it was like, I don't know, like a couple
$600, I
was
think.
oh my goodness. See, I was gonna say a couple hundred. So it was
Yeah.
$600
Uh-huh.
for her. And I was like, why don't we just do this? Why
In
don't we
response to a need.
need, right? So a need presents itself. It's like, instead of going, oh, we're serving God by having a treasurer role, why don't we look to keep our eyes on the needs of the valley and then be generous towards them? And we don't need a treasurer role.
It was great because like causality, right? Instead of making the money a cause, you got to give money, or you're asked to give money every month. We give money as an effect of a need.
Yeah.
And when we did that, people gave
So much more.
it's like 1,000 times more than what they did any other month.
Yep.
And cheerfully, because we knew what it was for.
Right.
Because that example you gave, this woman had parents in Cuba
Yep.
who were church planters.
Yep.
That was an incredible gift that we were able to give her. So yeah, your last role or your last act as the treasurer was to dissolve the role of treasurer.
Just to fire myself.
Yeah, to fire yourself. Talk about not trying to make anything happen, right? Like we're just like we don't want to be we don't want to be the ones making anything happen. And then finally, yours and my last act, even as members of the FCMF, we wrote a letter.
Hmm.
And or I did as the president. I wrote like a goodbye letter at the end of that year. That would have been 2023 now, right? And in the letter on behalf of the both of us, because for the next 6 months or so, the meetings were the attendance kept lowering, and it was like there was this tension involved around the FCMF because of you and me being in it. The persecution against John was coming directly at us now too. And we felt like God said we need to get out of the FCMF. And we also needed to let the FCMF know, and like the over 100 pastors who are getting these emails every month, let them know we're gone. Essentially, you're free and clear to come back if you want. Jonathan and Joel won't be there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where our story connects back to part 4 of yours. Because the thing we told them we would be working on is helping this community of people in Scotland. So that was the end of 2023. Any final words on the FCMF journey, Jonathan, before next time I have you on, we'll see what
Yeah.
happens from here.
I think it's interesting. Like, I really do feel like God heard my prayer back in, 2009, 2010, when I first started hearing about all of this stuff. And I remember driving past some big churches in the valley, just asking God for the opportunity to right this wrong, for, to have a part in bringing healing to the valley, to John, to our community. And I always wanted to um facilitate that. And like you said early on, it was just a series of things that we could just respond to.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's a heartbreaking story. It's still I still feel like it's a tragedy because of how many people have lost out on the truth and how many people have just, I feel like, needlessly had to suffer because of the FCEMF. And and so it's painful to talk about what has happened. I'm glad to have been able to be a part of it. And I think that the FCEMF is really and that season is helping and has helped us prepare for what's coming next in our lives. And I'm hoping to see the day when a big move of God hits the valley. Um, yeah, that would be some balms over the wounds that I still feel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an epic story. It was amazing to be a part of it. I wouldn't have wanted anybody else to be able to do what we did. I'm glad it's our name stamped on that story.
Yeah.
But what's been encouraging to me is to see the work, especially this year. So as of recording this, we're getting close to, it's been 2 years since you and I've been gone. And they're at a place right now where the FCMF is doing really well,
Hmm.
starting to have new faces, new ministries involved. And I can only see good things for the FCMF moving forward for as long as God wants the FCMF to be, alive. So new officers, new ministries, new leaders, people getting employment through this organization.
Hmm.
There's been a lot of cool stories that have happened since you and I have left. So yeah, it was man, thanks for being on today. This was great
Yeah.
rehashing this with you. It's been a while since you and I have talked about this at length. So man, can't wait to have you on for part 6 and see what God had in front of you after the FCMF journey was done.
Let's go, man. I'm excited.
All right. Take care, Jonathan. Love you,
See you,
man.
Joel. I love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. We hope you enjoyed. Thanks, Jonathan, for being on the show again and reliving some of our FCMF glory days. Yeah, let's dive in a little bit. So much of our story, and we emphasized this throughout, was about us operating in response, not initiating our will, but giving up control to the opportunities that came to us and making sure that when those opportunities came to us, we responded in the way we believe God wanted us to. This is why I want to talk about the doctrine of rest with you today. Now, we know God is the most powerful being. What's his nature? Go ahead and pause it right now if you need to answer for yourself. God is right and just, always and completely right, always and completely just. Now, God will achieve his plan in response to our imperfect actions, not by forcing his plan on us, because that wouldn't be right or just. He is going to be able to bring about his plan and remain right and just. Everything less than perfection that's going on is going to be our fault, not his. Now, if a person only looked at the God who was operating the way he was in the first 6 days of creation, yeah, you could make the case for a God that's like the Calvinists say, a God that initiated his will. And that is what God did during those 6 days. Nothing preceded his actions. However, on the 7th day, God rested. Hear this, Genesis 2, 1-3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made, and blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. The word rested comes from the Strong's 7673. It's a Hebrew word, Shabbath. Now, at the end of the 6th day, God gave authority to man. God allowed man to be the first cause. But there's a conflict there. Who has authority? Well, that's why on the seventh day God rested. Now, the meaning and etymology of the Hebrew word shows that rest means God ceased from his occupation of being the first cause. God stopped initiating his will, and from that point forward, responds to our will through justice. God moves for, against, or not at all in response to justice. Makes a lot of the Bible it makes all of the Bible make more sense, doesn't it? Now look at this passage from the book of Hebrews, because God's resting continues. Hebrews 4:9 says this, "There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God." Now this word, rest, is from the Greek word that's recorded in Strong's 45:20. It means the blessed rest from toils and troubles looked for in the age to come by the true worshipers of God and true Christians. So this is a future paradisical rest. This spoke of the people who would eventually experience salvation and eternal life. This spoke of the believers. How do these people achieve this? Hebrews 4:10 says, "For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his." The word rest in this verse is a different Greek word. It's recorded in Strong's 2663. Now, this is the same rest God experienced during the seventh day, ceasing from initiating one's will. So, how do believers enter into this future, eternal, paradisical life? Believers cease from initiating their own will. The people who give up their will to God and give him back his rightful place, that's ultimately what it means to be a believer. Otherwise, Hebrews 4:11 says this, "Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief." So those who don't cease from initiating their own will aren't believers. Furthermore, believing that God still initiates his will leads to loads of contradictions. So the ultimate approach to God's will is rest. Again, rest is ceasing from the occupation of being a first cause, giving up our will to God. God did this first, too. He set the example for us. God did this on the seventh day, and now we're encouraged to enter into his rest. So ultimately, we ought to be taking direction from God to love others in order to facilitate their purpose and progress. We can say those are the principles of grace, love, and leadership. If you want to sum up or generalize the principles of grace, love, and leadership, you could with the doctrine of rest. When you rest, when you give up control and put God back into the position of being a first cause through you, that is grace, love, and leadership through you. That will happen as a result. So resting is critical for God's will to happen. The more people rest, the quicker God's will happens. We are responsible for the efficiency of God's will. Have you ever asked, why is this taking so long? If you have, I'll give you the answer. It's us. That's it for today on Unlocked. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you once again to Jonathan for being a part of this show. I'm Dr. Joel Swakowski. You can find Jonathan on social media. I'll also put a link in the episode to the forum that we talked about. That was recorded and it is available to watch on YouTube. Yeah, so go check out those resources. Reach out to Jonathan or me if you have any other questions. Thank you for listening. Keep seeking truth and keep living it out. See you next time.